the border, but we're not seeing the reduced number of deaths, of autopsy deaths from fentanyl. And the president is just right on that topic. He is going to protect American lives, and he's being very, very tough on it. But let's face it, if you're not tough on protecting American lives, what's the point of being the president of the United States? He is so strong and focused on protecting American lives, and he's going to crack down and make sure this fentanyl is not coming in. That's why he's raised the tariff on China. Remember, in 2019, President Xi offered Donald Trump, when he was president, that he would put the death penalty on anybody who made the fentanyl ingredients. And the president is looking to get that in place, stop these ingredients and stop fentanyl coming in. Now, April 2nd is when we begin our reciprocal tariffs. So if you think about it, what he said was, okay, between now and April 2nd, I'm just going to give USMCA, I'm going to set that aside from these tariffs, but just for this month. And then on April 2nd, it's not that this reprieve starts, it's that on April 2nd, the reciprocal tariffs start. How you treat us is how we expect to treat you. And you have no idea what Canada does. I mean, the dairy products and all this other stuff, it's got to end.
So, and I have a lot of questions about April 2nd, but first on the fentanyl, you said that he wants to see fewer deaths. Is that the metric here for when these tariffs end? I mean, because according to U.S. Customs and Border Protection agents, only seized 43 pounds of fentanyl at the Canadian border last year. So is that a metric? Do we want to see that go down to zero? How are you judging when they've done enough?
Well, how funny is that, right? Like, if I seize less, does that mean, like, the stuff they haven't seized hasn't gone through? I think autopsy death, as horrible as that is to say, should be the statistic.
But a lot of it is Americans smuggling it over, right? It's not just Canadians.
Well, look, crooks are crooks, but I got to stop the flow across our border. We've got to stop the flow that has these ingredients being made in Canada and in Mexico coming into our country. We've got to close the border, which we're doing a better job of, obviously record low numbers, but we need to see fentanyl deaths decline. So that is the statistic.
So are we looking at daily autopsy deaths? Like, how do we do that? How, as a business, do you figure out what that's going to look like and when it ends?
Well, I think what you see is that this month, my expectation is the president will come to the agreement today, and hopefully we will announce this today, that USMCA compliant goods will not have a tariff for the next month until April 2nd. That includes the autos, and the autos were the lead in getting this deal done. But also Canada and Mexico have done a good job offering us ever more work to prove to us they're going to cut the fentanyl deaths. And then April 2nd, we're going to move into the reciprocal tariffs, and hopefully Mexico and Canada will have done a good enough job on fentanyl that this part of the conversation will be off the table, and we'll move just to the reciprocal tariff conversation. But if they haven't, this will stay on. Black and white, this will stay on. We need to protect American lives.
Is there any?
We will be able to right-size the government, but right now we need to continue doubling down and tripling down on the work that Elon Musk is doing.
So, I mean, the work that Elon Musk is doing has obviously been very important and a surprise to many people, particularly all those people in the Social Security rolls who are over 100 years old. It's just absolutely unacceptable. But you're going to have to really cut more than, just waste, fraud, and abuse to actually pay for what you are talking about in President Trump's agenda. Can you identify some offsets here in terms of what you're looking at in this reconciliation package?
Yeah, so we're looking at $4 to $4.5 trillion worth of tax cuts, perhaps more, and that's being offset by a mixture of economic growth, which, as you know, tax cuts stimulate the economy. These are very pro-growth, as well as at least $1.5 trillion of spending cuts. And let me tell you, you get $800 billion right off the bat from repealing the Green New Deal. That's something that Republicans have run on. That's half your spending cuts right there. What we've been seeing with DOGE, and this is something that we will be cycling into this, is, like I said, $4 billion every single day in savings. We have been seeing savings across the board, repealing welfare for illegal aliens, going after some of the most egregious forms of waste and uses of our taxpayer dollars. So, frankly, Maria, I don't think that we're going to have a problem finding offsets for these tax cuts.
Congressman, I mean, with all due respect, you haven't given me one offset. Okay? You say that you're not going to have a problem finding an offset. And so far, all I've heard you talk about is Elon Musk's fraud, waste, and abuse cuts, as well as eliminating climate change rules. Again, 76% of the money is going to mandatory spending. You know that better than anyone. I've got the numbers in front of me. You've got $36 trillion in debt. Isn't it time to start looking at the mandatory spending and trying to figure out how you're actually going to cut? I mean, I know nobody wants to say this, but you've got to cut stuff like Medicaid, don't you?
Well, listen, I actually did just give you an offset. I gave you $800 billion for over a 10-year window for Green New Deal subsidies that directly impacts the reconciliation process. We've got about another $100 billion related to welfare for illegal aliens. I agree with you. We are going to have to find some rationalizations. And Medicaid, for instance, job requirements for welfare. So there's a slew of offsets that we have in this reconciliation package that we're going to be looking through. These are the details we're working through right now. We've only just given the instructions to the various committees, but I just gave you about about $1 trillion worth of offsets right off the top of my head here.
Well, $1 trillion in offsets, but you got $4.5 trillion that you need to pay for in tax cuts.
We've got $1.5 trillion of spending cuts that are per the reconciliation instructions, and then we've underwritten $2.5 trillion worth of economic growth that comes from these tax cuts.
Yep.
As you know, whenever you reduce the individual income tax rate, the corporate tax rate, that is very positive that is stimulating economic growth. So you have a significant amount of offsets right there.
Unfortunately, the Atlanta GDP is expecting a contraction in the first quarter, not growth.
Well, listen, there are various GDP measures, and what we've done on the committee is we're not taking CBO's numbers. We're not taking necessarily any particular outside groups. We are doing our own analysis here, and we've underwritten about a 2.6% GDP growth, which is consistent and I think conservative relative to historical averages. All
right. Brandon Gill, we appreciate your work. We're watching your work. You're on the Budget Committee, and it's important work. So thanks very much for being here this morning.
Thank you.
Congressman, we'll see you soon. We'll be right back.
Your thoughts this Thursday. Just heard Gavin Newsom there, the governor of California, speaking. That with that podcast, it was obvious, same as when he sat down with Hannity, he would say something which would be used perhaps by his political opponents to spin their direct narrative. So I'm just asking you, why did Newsom feel the need to sit down? What's the thinking? What is actually achieved? Yeah, what is achieved by that? Because I'm at a loss. Now, you could say I'm a Brit from the outside looking in, which is a perfect excuse for you to, in the comment section again, explain Charlie Kirk getting to sit down with the governor of California, Gavin Newsom. Strong Democrat. Interesting.
So, like, you right now should come out and be like, you know what? The young man who's about to win the state championship in the long jump in female sports, that shouldn't happen. You as the governor should step out and say no.
No, and I appreciate
but like, would you do something like that? Would you say no men in female sports?
Well, I think it's an issue of fairness. I completely agree with you on that. So that's easy to call out, the unfairness of that. There's also a humility and a grace, that these poor people are more likely to commit suicide, have anxiety and depression. And the way that people talk down to vulnerable communities is an issue that I have a hard time with as well. So both things I can hold in my hand. How can we address this issue with the kind of decency that I think, is inherent in you, but not always expressed